series talking about getting freedom from your past. And we've talked about condemnation, words of condemnation you've received. We've talked about some of the woundings or hurts that you've received and how those things can just sort of trap you. And they actually influence what you do now if you don't let them go, if you don't let Christ come in and do that healing there. And this morning what we want to do is we want to talk about insecurities. Anyone here got some insecurities? The whole issue, just Keith is the only insecure one. It's kind of word, like, the word insecure, like what does that even mean? And you think if you're insecure, then you should be secure, right? Because you're insecure. But no, the English language has to mess everything up and say that, no, it's the opposite. That if you're insecure, then you're out of security, and there is no security, and that you're not safe. And so this idea of security, and do we have a sense of it? And that has sort of two different applications for us. One, it's either am I feeling secure in my sense of my identity? Am I confident in my ability to perform or to be acceptable to you? A lot of us, our insecurities are just rooted in are in me. Am I secure in who I am? And really, most of us, well, when I say most, I mean all of us struggle with a sense of saying, am I adequate? Am I lovable? Or is that always at risk? Could that fail at any point in time? The other realm of insecurity for us is just in our circumstances. Am I feeling safe in my circumstances? Is my life threatened? Or is that sense of adequacy threatened? Are my circumstances in such that I feel in danger in my circumstances? And the end result of this insecurity in both scenarios is that now there's this underlying sense of fear. And it's not always a fear that's right on the surface, but it's a fear that's deeper down in us, that's always sort of running below the surface. A fear that at some point in time I might fail. A fear that at some point in time you might not like me. A fear that at some point in time I might be hurt or wounded. A fear that I'm not safe. A fear, and these fears just keep controlling us. And what they lead us to do is then to play it safe. Have you ever played it safe? The problem is we play it too safe. I mean, there's a logical, rational play it safe. Like when my daughter is sitting on the edge of a cliff at Point Coney in Cape Breton, and she's singing, hey, I'm on the top of this 50-foot cliff, my feet are dangling over the edge, wonderful view, and we're yelling at her, get away from the edge, because we know that erosion cuts away underneath that little surface grassy area, and that sitting on the edge, it could give away and you could plummet 50 feet. And she's oblivious to that at the time. But we're saying, no, get back, play it safe. And when you don't know, play it safe. That's a logical play it safe. But what our insecurities and fears do is they cause us, maybe force us to play it too safe in life. And so what we do is we put ourselves inside a bubble. I really wish I had a big hamster ball here, one of those big ones. I want to do my whole sermon from inside a hamster ball this morning. But just thought that might be a little distracting, more for me than you guys. But the idea is we put ourselves in this bubble, and this bubble keeps us safe. And this bubble is our realm of security. And I will only go through life and as long as I got this bubble of safety around me. It'll keep people a little bit distant, because if they get too close, then I can be hurt. So my bubble keeps me safe from you guys, but also keeps me safe in other circumstances. And my bubble keeps me in this sort of sense of, no, I'm okay now. In my bubble, I'm okay. I'm safe and I'm secure and I'm loved and you know, all this sort of stuff. This is what my bubble is. But the bubble actually becomes a prison, doesn't it? I think it keeps me safe, but it actually traps me inside, because the reality is that most of life happens outside this bubble. Life happens outside the bubble. Life in here isn't really life. It's a limited, closed-in thing, but real life happens outside the bubble and outside my control and outside my comforts. And so life becomes very restrictive. And the problem that you eventually discover if you've lived in the bubble is that there's not a whole lot of joy in the bubble. When you're constantly playing it safe, when you're constantly playing it secure, when you're keeping your guards and defenses up constantly, there's no joy in that. Fear is actually the wall of the bubble. It's fear. You're actually enclosed in fear, and fear now controls your life, and you are not free. And so people wonder, why don't I have joy? Why don't I have effectiveness? Why don't I have a sense of fulfilled life? It's because there is a bubble of fear around your life that is hindering you from experiencing the life that God created you to experience. And this is each of our problems. It's my problem, and it's your problem. The extent or the question is, to what extent is that bubble there, and do we recognize it? Can we even see it, or are we just become so oblivious? Because the bubble's clear, and I can sort of see out, but notice it's going to be a little foggy. But it's like you got a pair of dirty glasses, and you don't even notice they're dirty until you take them off and you clean them, and suddenly, whoa, what a difference. Well, when we live in the bubble, all we see is that filtered, that dirty sort of barrier around us, and we don't see life clearly. Fear distorts a picture of life for us. And so the other thing that the bubble does in keeping us safe is it prevents us from living a life of faith. There is no faith inside the bubble. Faith exists outside the bubble. Listen to what it says in Hebrews 11, verse 6. And it says, and it is impossible to please God without faith. Because relationship with God lives in the faith realm, where we step outside of our security and our controls. We step out of our bubble into the unknown with God, and God says, that's where I am. I'm outside your bubble. You'll never find God in a bubble. God lives outside the bubble. And what he wants us to do is step outside the bubble, step out of our realm of control and security, and just to enjoy him and to trust him and to give our life to him. Well, how do we do that? Because this wall that we've put up here has been built from our childhood on. It's events in our childhood that have done this. It's beliefs from our childhood right into adulthood that have created this wall of security and wall of safety. And so that's what we want to be exploring today as we go through. But we've talked about wanting people to share their personal stories and their testimonies. And so Deb Beck is going to come, and she's got a bit of a life story that she wants to share with you. Just to talk a little bit about some of these insecurities and these fears that she's had, but then what God's happened to do with those. Come around my bubble.
I could have been voted Miss Insecure in 1984. To have quiet and time alone. I wasn't adventurous and didn't like to venture too far from home, and looking back, I believe my fear was that something would happen to my parents. When I was 16, I worked after school part-time as a clerk at Zellers in the Dartmouth Shopping Center. Dating myself now. A young, handsome police officer used to drop by to see me when he was assigned to the beat. We fell in love with each other, but to our shame, I became pregnant. We lied to our families and told them that I had a tumor and needed surgery, but the truth was that I had an abortion because of fear, shame, and to save us embarrassment. I was young and self-centered, and over the years, my shame helped me to block this out of my mind as though it never happened, and very, very few people know about this. However, he proposed, and in May of 1975 we were married and moved to Lunenburg, where my husband accepted a probationary job as Deputy Chief of Police. We started to enjoy small-town living, and to our great joy, our daughter Holly was born on September 17, 1981. However, shortly after that, the Police Commission terminated my husband's position at the end of his probationary period. This job loss put a lot of stress on our marriage, but looking back, I can see that God was using these circumstances to bring me to the end of myself and to draw me to Him. In Lunenburg, we attended a church where I met some very nice ladies and became introduced to Christian Women's Club. Like my parents, I am an optimist, but the changes I saw in my husband scared me, and I was feeling very much alone and insecure about our marriage and our future. The summer of 1981, my sister and her husband visited us from Ontario and shared with us about their newfound relationship with God through Jesus Christ. I didn't understand everything they were saying, but I could see changes in them and saw that they were very peaceful, and I wanted to know more. I was still very insecure at this point in my life and was looking for strength and answers outside of myself. I started working with Christian Women's Club and was thirsty for everything God had to teach me. An older Christian friend mentored me, and by learning what God had to say about death in the Bible, I no longer had a fear of dying. I now had a relationship with God through His Son, Jesus Christ, and now know that when I die, I will go to heaven, not because of anything that I have done, but because I have a clean slate. Jesus had taken all my sins, past, present, and future, to the cross, including the abortion, and I had a brand new start every day. In 1984, we decided that Holly should have a sibling, and I became pregnant with our son, Chris. Chris was born on Holly's 3rd birthday on September 17th, and 2 weeks later, a friend visited me and confirmed what I had feared. My husband was having an affair. My world was falling apart. Here I was with a 3-year-old and a new baby, and it didn't look good for our marriage. I was angry and hurt and scared and would lie in bed and shake until he left for work in the morning, afraid of what I would do to him if I got up. My husband left our home 10 days before Christmas by court order, and I was suddenly a single parent without a job and without financial support and quickly needed to get work. Thankfully, I was hired by the school board in Bridgewater, where I worked 16 years before moving to Dartmouth to work with the Halifax Regional School Board, where I worked 12 years. It's funny how things become so clear looking back. God could see my future, and He drew my heart and surrounded me with Christian friends who supported me and placed me in a wonderful Bible-teaching church where I could learn about Him. I thank God that through all those years of raising my children on my own, we were never in want, not even once. I would pray for whatever we needed, and God just provided, that faith of a new Christian. I will share some neat stories with you at another time about how God provided for us. Even amidst the chaos and pain, my newfound faith was exciting as my relationship with God grew and as He taught me that I could depend on Him and trust Him. I believe that God pays special attention to those who are alone. And 2 Chronicles 16:9 says, "The eyes of the Lord go to and fro throughout the whole earth, showing Himself strong on behalf of those whose hearts are faithful to Him." I have made lots and lots of mistakes and bad decisions in my life. But if I've learned anything, it is that God is faithful. Over time, He took away my fear of death and my insecurities as I learned to trust Him. I truly believe that I would not be here today if God had not saved me and jealously protected me, which is another story, and saved me from myself. My story is not over yet, and my greatest goal is to finish well in God's eyes. I have learned that no human being can love me as well as God does, and no one but God can promise that He will always be with me. God continues to use the hardships of my life to grow character, and I am learning to live the abundant life He has promised to us. Please join with me in a short prayer of thankfulness to God. Dear Heavenly Father, I praise You with a heart of thankfulness today for Your love, protection, and provision. But thank You most of all for Your forgiveness and making me a part of Your family and the promise of a home in heaven. In Jesus' name, amen.